little vid here on the deception in the martial arts, particular emphasis on breaking, Tameshiwari in Japanese, but it just means like breaking. It means like try and break it. That's all it breaks down. That's all it translates as. I've tried this a couple of times, but no, I'll try it again. Just had my morning cup of Joe, so I've got a little bit of a caffeine buzz on. I was going to introduce it by talking about the late great Jon Bluming, the as the Japanese called him, Orlando no Dobutsu, which translates as the Dutch animal. That's what the Japanese called him. He was a student of Ayama's Masayama, the legendary Masayama. He knew Masayama for years, or they knew each other. Anyway, Bluming got 10th dan in judo and 9th dan in karate, or I think it was the other way around, and one or the other, but obviously two extremely high grades. In one case, the highest grade it's possible to get. I think Ayama gave him 10th dan. And he was 6'4" and built like a bear, Bluming. But he was he grew up like rough, rough area of Amsterdam, and it was during the Second World War. And I think it was predominantly a very Jewish neighbourhood Bluming grew up in, and the SS came into this neighbourhood and did what the SS did. May they burn in hell for all eternity, to the Jewish residents there. And anyway, obviously his upbringing basically scarred Bluming, and he said himself he could have gone to the bad. He could have easily became a criminal or started a criminal career, but instead he went to he fought in the Korean War, and he was injured in the Korean War, so became a soldier. I think it was something like he was hit by a mortar or something. I mean, the guy was made of iron, but he injured his leg, and they had to ship him off to Japan for some operation they required. And while he was there, while he was convalescing, I think he went to the local Aikido hall, and he saw the fabled, the small old guy chucking around much bigger guys, like ragdolls, as it's always described. I mean, in just a few years' time, he'd be poo-pooing that one because, it's a bit scripted, isn't it? But at the time, he was impressed enough to want to start this mysterious Eastern martial arts. I mean, it was still just after the war, the Second World War, and all these guys like Don Drager and Robert Smith, the martial arts historian, were going into the East. It was still very much viewed of almost like superstitious awe, like there were magic things you could learn. So anyway, Bluming started doing judo, and then he he met Masayama and all sort of thing. But what he described as his first experience of breaking was he saw this guy, Japanese guy, break, I think it's 15 tiles. Now, it doesn't specify what these tiles were, whether they were quara tiles. Well, quara is the Japanese for tile, but the thick grey ridge tiles, I've broken a few of them on my channel. Quara tile break, I think it's called, or something. But apparently this guy, Bluming saw, broke 15 of them, and they weren't spaced. There weren't spaces between them, as there commonly are on these breaks. So you break the first few, and the weight of the rest just shatter all the others beneath it. You see it a lot in like ice breaks and stuff. The screen keeps going dark. Yes, 15 of these tiles just placed one on top of the other. And then someone said to Bluming, "You ever go, gaijin," which is sometimes the rough way of referring to foreigners. So Bluming, he had a go, and he said, I wish I could do his accent. He's got a wonderful, thick Dutch accent, especially when he got a bit narky, because he spoke his mind, Bluming. That was one thing. So he tried. He was like, "Oh, damn near broke my wrist." I think he was out of action for a week. Had to have his wrist strapped up. So he thought, my God, and as I say, he was a big guy, and he'd already done a bit of training and whatever. So he couldn't work out why he couldn't do this. And then he found out, eventually, on the underside of these tiles, it was scored through to within literally a couple of millimetres. It had been cut through. So you could just, probably jab them hard with your fingertips and the tiles would break. They were absolutely on their, they'd break themselves. Obviously, just that little scrap of tile just holding the two halves together. So that was his first experience of breaking, and So I mean, Jon Bluming, as I say, spoke his mind. He's gone on record as referring to Bruce Lee as a damned drug addict. I think it was a Martial Arts: The Real Story, which was a documentary broadcast in England 20 years ago. It was great because we're interviewing Bluming, who's just a real hardcore. You know, I think it was Kyokushin. Well, it must have been Masayama, Kyokushin karate guy and judo guy, and he sort of used to mix them up. He had the MMA thing going on. The legendary fighter Chris Dolman, he was his coach, Bluming coach Chris Dolman. But he's there. He's like, you know, all the spiritual stuff and stuff. It's if people want to do that, great. It's up to them. But I like to fight. And other people they're interviewing are talking about ki and focus, the inner meridian points and whatever. So he's a complete antithesis. Is that opposite? I'm trying to avoid the fancy words. Opposite of that. So yeah, he called Bruce Lee a drug addict, and even Oyama. I mean, a lot of people said Bluming was bitter because of the fame Oyama got, the attention Oyama got. So Bluming said that like the horns on the famous thing of Oyama fighting a bull, which apparently wasn't a bull. It was some, I can't even remember what animal it was, but some animal with four horns, but less powerful and bad tempered than a bull. Oyama had the horns partially sawn before the creature came out, whatever it was, so a lot easier to take off. Similarly, the bottle top break was that really sharp wire that cuts glass. Apparently, these bottle tops were almost sawn through. So when he did that, and this is what Bluming says. You know, God, it feels wrong of me to even like suggest things about Oyama, but if it did happen, the thing was, he was, because it's when you see sometimes the bottle break, it seems a very clean break. I've always thought that. I've seen it not just Oyama's break, a few of them. But I mean, if it did happen, Oyama and others that were, I mean, Oyama was nearly superhuman, so I was concerned. So was Bluming, but all sorts of stuff. But I think if these guys did if they took liberties, shall we say, sometimes they were trying to build up businesses and attract people and stuff. They were pushing the boundaries and stuff. I've got no time for cheating, put on me personally as much as it matters, but I've no time for people who cheat on a much more insidious scale, as I call it. But the real big boys taking a few liberties, well, they were trying to get students and stuff. So I don't know. But I always I did like. I mean, people said Bluming was bitter, or he said too much or something. But he had zero tolerance for bullshit. And I kind of like a cold eye, because I honestly think martial arts, if it's anything, it's just be about honesty, and just if something doesn't work or it's not practical. So I really like that Ramsey Juhi, the famous YouTube commentator, when he took apart that women's self-defense, these videos of women's self-defense, and none of these techniques work at all. And at the end of the day, it could save someone's life, because people think, actually, I can't walk around thinking that I'm capable of doing X, Y, Z, when it can be so easily disproved. So, you know, people like Ramsey Juhi and Jon Bluming are sometimes invaluable, in my humble opinion. I'll move this quickly now on to breaking in deception and breaking. So there's various things. Talk about the underscored tiles. Jon Bluming found out tiles sword, but bricks can be very brittle anyway. There's that how to break a brick video on YouTube, which is quite popular. A rather large American guy. He's got two pillars of bricks, and he balances one across the top, and he puts a towel across it, and he breaks it, and then he shows how he does it by raising the brick. So this is where you get the keyboard ninjutsu warriors who shout at everyone who does a break, who raises it slightly. Oh, that's why you can do it. It's really easy. It's not. The brick the chap breaks is extremely brittle. I think it's got a ceramic brick. English, we used to call them the orange bricks. In English, called rubbers. But like a rubber or ceramic brick, you can span it. I call it a flush break. You wouldn't be able to do it like straight off. You've never done any braking. If you've done a little bit, you can just break it, not by raising it. But I mean, what that chap does, good luck trying that for an engineering brick, for example, because you run the risk of really hurting yourself. This is why I say there should be disclaimers on this video, because it makes out it's really easy and anyone can do it. Like sometimes these how to breaks. The where was that chap recently did the thing with Steven Seagal, Jesse Enkamp? I saw his video. It's like, feel the key flowing in your hand and stuff. It's like, no, show a little bit. I'm not denying he's an extremely skilled martial artist, but he probably hasn't done that much breaking, and it's not that sort of stuff is nonsense. And raising can make a break much easier. But if you're going to break an engineering brick, for example, I don't think there's anyone on earth that could break an engineering brick, say, flush. I really don't. You have to raise it. The trick is more like raising it as little as you can on a hard surface. I commonly use an anvil, because you have to generate a lot of power with the striking hand, still a lot. So it's not actually that much of a cheat. If it's like a little pebble or something, you raise it, then yeah. But it's pretty obvious what you're doing as well, not disguising much. But bricks also can be rebaked. I think that's one. I've never tried it, nor will I ever, but they can be rebaked. I think that's on a lot of martial arts supposed breaking tournaments where they use rebaked bricks. Apparently makes them really brittle. Tiles, stuff space, but everyone knows that one if you space stuff. See it a lot on ice breaks. Ice breaks, I'm not sure. Chap who runs the dojo, who used to train in London, he was very famous in like '79. It's a short documentary called Ice Break, and it was shown in British cinemas before. I think it was Rocky. It was like the little film that's shown before. In the old days, they showed a little feature or something. It was documentary and building up, and then showing the break. Huge slabs of ice. But apparently, that said, I'm pretty sure there was not. I know there was no jiggery pokery there, but if one was to do a cheat on ice, apparently the two parts of ice are sawn and stuck back together with a bit of water, frozen, covered in water and stuck back together in the freezer. So they join together. Apparently that part is really weak. And but normally they're kind of, the documentary was huge slabs of ice, usually the smaller ones. And I've seen a number of videos where it's during the day and it might be quite a warm day. So obviously the ice is starting to melt a bit. And also the guy who's doing the break will do the whole sort of all this sort of kung fu noises, as it were, which obviously helps the ice get that much softer. And one at the end, he did all that, and then they covered the ice in some sort of whatever lighter fluid and set up a fire, and then he broke it. Well, yeah, that's going to just make it's not exactly subtle, is it? I'll cover this ice in fire. What will happen? That won't help my break at all, will it? But to counteract that, I saw another. It was in India, and the karate guy goes to the break and he misses. He hits his wrist, and it's an instant break. His hand's at a horrible angle, and so it's not all fake. And that's it. People breaking lots of tiles and stuff all piled up, but there's all sort of higgledy-piggledy and jumbled together, and it rocks. Well, there's lots of air pockets, you might say, and stuff, and it just all crashes down on each other. And it's like putting space in between things. If things aren't tight together, they're a whole lot easier to break. And if it's commonly like little tiles and stuff, it rates these again. Not to go into too much of a bash other videos all the time, but I do have issues with some of these how to break videos, and they break thin things, almost like slivers of things. It really doesn't prove anything. And even if there's a few of them piled up, if they rock and stuff, they just all crash into each other. So that's it. Yeah, I sort of went around the house a bit on that one, but basically deception in the martial arts with a bit of emphasis on breaking there. Cheers.